To be the fastest driver on track, you need to understand mechanical grip on a whole new level. Not only will you be able to make proper setup changes to get the car to behave in your liking, but you also will really understand how your inputs are going to affect your lap time, your performance, and your consistency. I've been creating multiple setups for different simulators, and this is how I approach the mechanical grip. Let's go. There are three components you really need to understand about mechanical grip. This way you'll have a deep understanding what it does and how it's going to help you in your setup build. So I'm going to talk about the spring, stiffness, and I'm going to talk about the travel of it and the anti-roll bar. If you understand those three things about mechanical grip, I think you can go a long way understanding it really what's happening every time you, let's say, understeer and oversteer. Everything from road surface, from tire to the chassis and then up till you could everything you could see as a spring. And we're gonna talk about the tire being a spring, the suspension being a spring, and the anti-roll bar. Obviously the bump rubbers or packers and the chassis is also some sort of a spring, but if you get a basic understanding for the springs of the car and the tire, you'll know next time what you need to change in your car setup. So a tire, when it's being forced onto the tarmac from the car perspective, there will be a window of the tire that creates the optimal tire patch, and this gives you the most efficient coefficient of friction. Now, I will not get into those difficult terminologies, but it's important to understand that the perfect tire load is only achieved by having the proper temperatures, the proper alignment of the tire onto the surface, and the amount of pressure that is on the asphalt. If we get this throughout the lap very closely to this condition, you will have the most mechanical grip available. Therefore, you could be the fastest guy on track. And you can create the situation by tuning the wheel rates, anti-roll bar. You can achieve this with the perfect spring travel, the stiffness of the springs, and the anti-roll bar. Now, obviously, that's very hard to achieve, and you're always gonna have to make some compromises. And whenever you get into the situation where you have too much load on the tire, you'll get a deformation in your tire rubber, and you actually lose the efficiency of the tire grip. Now, you can create this to get certain behavior in the car, but you can also overdo some values and have this situation always working for you. Now, this situation can happen when you run too soft springs or too hard springs. To explain this fully, you can have a situation where your spring is really nice and compliant, and then you will have the optimal tire patch. But when the spring is too soft and you run into a bump, the tire needs to pick up this load, so therefore the tire patch will be overloaded when you, let's say, hit a curb or have an elevation change or all those kinds of things. When your spring is too stiff and you're driving, let's say, slowly, you're hitting the brakes and the spring is not moving, then that means the tire needs to shock up the elevation change, and it will overload as well. So people say lower wheel rates and you get more grip. Not really, because if you're going fast, then you'll overload the tires as well. The absolute goal of these springs is to find a wheel that is constantly moving in its suspension without having the tire taking up all the shocks and load all the time. Let me explain further. The GT3 car is heavier than 1,000 kilos, and this BMW absolutely doesn't have a 50-50-50 or 20-20-25 weight distribution, but I'm going to use this to make this example so everybody can understand what's happening with tires and the mechanical grip of the car. Weight transfer, vital, important, unavoidable, basically. So what's going to happen when you corner the car, the weight of the car will move to the outside wheels, and the outside wheels need to take up that load. These values that I'm providing here are not realistic. They have nothing to do with real like math or weight transfer values. This is just to explain it, because if you go with a GT3 car, like 200 kilometers, let's say on the brakes, these values will be way higher than I'm explaining here, but I will use this 1000 kilos and the separation of it so you can understand how the tires work together from a mechanical grip standpoint. So the weight transfer is always happening. When you brake, when you accelerate, the only difference is with your suspension setup, how your suspension is going to cope with that weight transfer, right? And if you can understand that, boy, then you can get like, you know what's going to happen with your car. Also, when you're driving, you know, okay, I have a stiff setup. This is what's going to happen in this corner. I have a soft setup. I know what's going to happen in the fast corner. To build further on my box model, this green box represents body roll. And the bigger this box gets, the bigger suspension travel we have. And if you have a lot of suspension travel, so meaning you have your spring and it can compress by a lot, you get a lot of body roll because the car is moving from left to right. And this will also be the case when we're hitting the brakes fully. The car will be able to pitch and dive a lot. And when you go on throttle, the car will squat a lot backwards. Now, if you have huge ranges, this means the tires can always have the contact with the road and it will not overload that much. Let's talk about if we're just driving in a straight line. Yeah, and you have short suspension travel. So the wheel is confined in a small spring area, and imagine that the road surface, it's never flat. It's always moving, it's always changing. So let's say you go on a track like Alton Park or Noordschleife, there will be a situation where this part of the track will be higher and this part of the track will be lower, right? So what's going to happen is that then all of a sudden, with a short suspension travel, meaning not a lot of mechanical grip, this tire gets the overload. Because the spring is compressed fully and it basically cannot go anywhere, so the tire patch is going to be influenced in a negative way. Then, on the other side of the car, let's say we have a pothole here, then because we have such a short suspension travel, this tire is actually not on the contact with the road surface because it simply doesn't have the range to go down anymore, right? So this can happen throughout a corner, or you can have this situation for like a part of a corner or a part of the track, but you can also think about this happening like 100 times a second with a track that's constantly changing in height. Then when you accelerate or when you hit the brakes fully and you have constantly different tires having this overload every time, this is going to hurt your braking performance. It's also going to hurt your accelerating performance. It's going to hurt like your contact that you will have with the road surface. Therefore, this short, soft suspension travel will constantly have tires that are overloading and losing grip. How can you tackle this? If you just increase your spring travel from, I don't know, let's say it was 3 centimeters, you bring that up to 4, or it was 1 and you bring it up to 2, then an elevation change of a centimeter or a pothole of a centimeter all of a sudden isn't a problem anymore. But now we increase this box, and the side effect of this, you get body roll back in return. Now, I've found that when you're going on tracks where we don't have a lot of like fast situations, or not a lot of direction changes, then a little bit longer suspension travel can help you out in the mechanical grip section. And this will increase the acceleration. You will have more grip on acceleration whenever you hit a pothole. When you start to brake and there's like an elevation change or a bump, these tires are more optimized because the suspension is coping with the elevation changes and the bumps, but also with the potholes, the suspension will move more downwards because we just have more range to take up all shocks from the road surface area. The springs are helping the tire to create more mechanical grip. So I'll show you some examples how this can look in a simulator, but before I go there, could you please hit that like button? I'm trying to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. It is fast approaching, so if you could subscribe to the channel as well if you like this kind of content. Let's go to the examples. Now, I created an extreme situation with the setup with long travel and soft suspension. You can see this car is basically on a mattress, right? So we're braking here, and like you can see the changes I make with the steering wheel, and the car just doesn't do anything, right? And you can see how it's kind of like having the body roll left and right, but it's there's basically nothing happening. I have a lot of mechanical grip. Also, the car pitches a lot when I'm braking. So in this example, I took another extreme where we don't have any ranges. This car is basically only on its bump stops, and that will create a very harsh and direct ride that you can see in this video. I cannot even have control at this point, but it's just to illustrate a point that this chicane is absolutely unforgiving. Every elevation change you have on track you feel, and you can see on element overlay I don't even have the wheel slip at this point, so I'm losing basically grip. But the difference is this car is very planted and stable on this straight. It's not rolling everywhere, it's super direct. Whenever I start steering the car, it gives me the answer, right? And also with the braking, no pitch at all. Let's say we go cornering, right? So I can hear people say already, okay, we just like increase massive ranges on our suspension and we'll have the most grip. But you will have the trouble of a lot of body roll. And imagine the body roll. So let's say we're cornering to the right here and the body roll goes to the left. Weight transfer is gonna happen, we cannot avoid it. The body roll makes the outside wheels in this situation, and again, this is not proper mathematics or whatever, but this is just how I want to explain it. The outside wheels taking up, I don't know, 300 kilos of the load, and the inside will take 200, right? Because we have long travel, the car shifts to the left and we'll have 300 and 300, and the insides is 200. So we have a lot of mechanical grip in this situation, but we also have a delay. The car has more time, needs to have more time to settle into the corner. If we got short suspension travel and we're doing that same corner again, and we have less body roll in this situation, but now the outside tires are get more burden of the weight of the car, so it will be easier for the outside tires to overload. In this situation you will have less mechanical grip, but it will be a car that is more responsive and reactive, and it's easier to save when you oversteer or understeer. And the best thing about this is when you have a circuit with a lot of chicanes going left and right, it's gonna take time, a lot less time in this situation, for the body roll to occur. So that's the balance you need to figure out every time. So know that when you have a corner that's going fast left and right, and you feel like, okay, the first corner I will do, then the next one it feels sluggish, you have too much travel in your suspension. Now let's go back to long suspension travel. Whenever you go on the throttle and you're cornering, the body roll is not only gonna occur, but you're also gonna have a car that will squat to the back, right? So the body roll will be all the way positioned here in this moment, but we have a decent weight difference between the rear tires, giving us a lot of traction on acceleration. But this can also feel very understeery because all this grip is on the back, because the body roll and the suspension making the rear tire so very effective. This can be very beneficial. I see this in like working very well in a set of course competition at the moment. Just create massive amount of mechanical grip and you'll be accelerating out of slow corners like nobody else. But the downside of this is that that body roll that we had when we're accelerating going right, now we're braking and that body roll needs to go all the way to the other side. So the car was going from a squat body roll position to the left. We're turning the steering wheel. The body roll all the way needs to shift to this corner. And that will take a lot of time. And that will also make your input very numb. Yeah, you can really push the steering wheel and you get in the situation where your inputs aren't really like translated fast enough to the car, because the body roll first needs to occur before the tires get grip. Now, the tires are coping with the asphalt very good because we have long travel. It will constantly touch the tarmac and you can get a lot of grip from this. So this is also very driver dependent, and this is why the setups that like people build, they are so personal, because some people really like this and other people absolutely hate this. So to find your own balance, you need to understand that this long ass travel that you can have on your suspension going to create this effect. Now let's talk about the same situation again when we are on throttle and we have a short and maybe stiffer suspension, or at least short suspension travel. Now when you're on throttle and you're cornering, the outside tire is going to pick up more of that weight because the suspension is just not coping with the asphalt. So let's say there will be an elevation change here and the outside rear tire takes up all the load all of a sudden, and you get this tire patch to deform and lose its efficiency. Now this can be desirable. I like this a lot with the Merc. I like this a lot with the Aston Martin because this allows me to create rotation when I'm on throttle. Downside of this though is that the inside tire is not helping the car to accelerate that much. So when we have the body roll to this side and the weight transfer on this side, these tires are doing way less to keep the car under traction. This tire as well, yeah, because you don't have less contact with the road in this instance. Again, the upside is going to be whenever we shift direction, so we did throttle going right and we're braking going left all of a sudden, we have a very swift and fast movement of the body roll and we immediately get the direction change. But then again, this tire isn't that free in its suspension, so the tire patch needs to pick up all the shocks and all the elevation change on track, making this tire overload all of a sudden. Also, this tire will be very underloaded because the body roll and the suspension is just not coping with the road surface anymore. So in a way, this is less mechanical grip. So what you need to do then, what's the compromise? Well, this first thing is going to be like, what do you like? Do you like a car that has a little bit more, needs a little bit more time to settle into the corner? Or do you like a car that is just super agile and precise? Every time you hit it some input, it's gonna set a direction change. This is gonna be very skill and taste dependent. So what you can do as a compromise is, if you have a track where there's a lot of bumps, you could pick a longer suspension travel but a little bit of a stiffer springs to compromise this effect. So let's say there will be a huge bump somewhere on the track and you have a little bit of a stiffer wheel rate. This means the tire might feel a bit more overloaded, but there's still this suspension travel to travel into, so the tire isn't exposed to all of a sudden overload situation. And it also counts for the other tires. This could feel more balanced. Now, if you have a track with a lot of super slow corners, then yeah, you might run a little bit softer springs everywhere. But if you have a track with a lot of fast corners, like currently I'm working Silverstone, I found that if I get just a little bit more stiffer front springs, I'll use the front tires a lot better in the fast situations. Now, how does the anti-roll bar come into play in this situation? To give an extreme example, if you have a soft anti-roll bar, the weight of the different wheels are going to be more balanced, and you're going to trade off body roll for doing this. So in this situation, this sweet looking Audi is having more equal load on these front tires in this situation, but we get body roll because of it. Now, if we have a very stiff anti-roll bar, then the front suspension cannot move separately from each other anymore, and we're gonna have a outside tire having to pick up all the load from the weight of the car while cornering, and the inside tire will not do a lot. So why do you want to create this situation in your car setup builds? Why are we picking anti-roll bar over springs in this situation? Whenever you get into the situation where you have a decent amount of spring travel and wheel rates, spring rates, the stiffness of the springs, but you still have the idea that when you're entering the corner, you get some understeer, and there might be a situation where you go on throttle and you feel like, okay, I still have some over or understeer, but I really like the amount of ranges that I have on my suspension. So let's say you went all the way figuring out if the tire constantly has the proper ranges in the spring travel, and you want to still create some different balance without compromising the springs. The best thing about anti-roll bar tuning is that we are not affecting the dive of the car, and we're not affecting the squat of the car when it's going backwards when we're on throttle. So from an aerodynamic standpoint, this can be vital. Let's say you got really good ranges on your spring travel, but you have a good balance, but in the mechanical section, the car just won't turn in anymore. And this is going to be, I mean, I like this the most about the anti-roll bar, because what's going to happen, let's say you have a stiff situation in a slow corner, right? And the outside tire is overloading because you're running a stiff anti-roll bar on the front. So this was the first situation, but now we do a softer anti-roll bar. This means the green box moves more outside of the original box, creating more body roll, but the load of the outside wheel is all of a sudden reduced and the inside wheel gets more load. So they are working more optimally in this entering or braking into the corner. Now, if you do this with a McLaren and an ACC and you drop all the front anti-roll bar, you get way too much. It's basically impossible to do it because you get too much grip on the front. You get like, your car just kills you with oversteer, right? So a McLaren gets more of the stiffness of it, will have a better balance, but at least you won't have a change in the pitch or dive or the squat of the car. Same goes for the rear end of the car. Normally, you would say with the soft and like stiff or like short suspension, you get the overload on the tire. Now, what if you just got oversteer every time in this situation? You soften the anti-roll bar. You don't get a car that squats backwards anymore, but you do get a better weight balance on the different tires. Now you can see, let's say if I have a differential setting, where the inside tire is going to slip very easily and you go on throttle, this means that the inside tire will have less weight on it, will have less pressure. This will start to spin more easily. But if you pick a softer anti-roll bar setting, then all of a sudden this inside wheel is going to help the outside a lot more. And this can make your acceleration go way better. And you don't have the burden of more ranges to the back. So the body roll will not move backwards that much. But we do have more traction. And like this is what you see in ACC. Low anti-roll bar setting, a little bit of travel on the rear springs. You basically get the most acceleration out of the slow corners. This is what a soft anti-roll bar can really help you do. And you can also see when you go back to the previous slide, is that whenever you're braking, these anti-roll bar settings are gonna have a huge effect on your brake bias as well. Because you know, okay, the back inside tire with my low travel and let's say stiff anti-roll bar is gonna lock up this rear tire very easily, right? Also with the front, it's gonna lock up this front tire way more easily. So it's whatever you like. Softer anti-roll bar settings will give potentially more mechanical grip. So I get it. You got a lot of information. You got a lot of setup changes. We made multiple examples. If you want to have a solver that's covering all of these changes, you want to subscribe to my newsletter in the link down below, because over there I created a solver that just explains these kinds of setup changes, and you can very quickly use this. Let's say print this out next to your PC and you can really see, oh, I need to change this, oh, I need to change that to get the desired behavior combined with this video. So have a look. Remember, whenever you're changing your wheel rates, your suspension travel, and your anti-roll bar, you want to make sure it is always moving in its suspension. So whenever it hits the bump stop, the potential for your tire to overload will increase. Whenever you're going slowly and you're braking and the suspension cannot travel because there's simply not that amount of weight on a suspension, then also your tire is going to be overloaded. So you constantly need to find a balance. Now, just to explain it even better, if you get a track with a lot of fast corners and a lot of fast direction changes, you're probably gonna get away with a setup that is gonna be stiffer because you don't have a slow corner. If you have super slow corners everywhere and you have a very stiff suspension and like short suspension travel, this means that the tires need to constantly work around with the load. So keep the wheel moving in its suspension. That way you got the most mechanical grip and the most tire contact without overloading or underloading the tires. I've been totally ignoring the aerodynamics of a GT3 car. So in this video here on top, I'm gonna explain all the aerodynamics parts, and just know that body roll hurts your aerodynamic performance. So you cannot go max mechanical grip with loads of amounts of body roll, because that will absolutely destroy the aerodynamics of your car. If you want to know more about aerodynamics of the car and how to make those setup changes work for you, I really suggest you watch this video because we'll explain it fully over there. Thanks for watching.